Days turned into weeks, and town life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The sheriff and I continued to patrol the outskirts, looking for any signs of trouble. But for the first time in a long while, things were quiet. One evening, as I sat on my porch, enjoying a rare moment of peace, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lydia. "Mr. Grayson, we have received word of a new threat. A powerful vampire lord has been sighted in the neighboring town. We need your help to stop him." With a sigh, I got to my feet, already reaching for my gear. The hunt never truly ended, and there was always another monster to face. As I drove towards the neighboring town, the sun setting behind me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was what I lived for, what I was born to do. Because I was Jackson Grayson, the best monster hunter this side of the Rockies, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. As I drove towards the neighboring town, the setting sun cast long shadows over the landscape. My mind raced with thoughts of the vampire lord. Vampires were notoriously difficult to kill, and a vampire lord would be even more formidable. I mentally checked off the items in my gear: silver bullets, wooden stakes, holy water, and a few special surprises I'd picked up over the years. The town of Redvale was small and unassuming, much like my own. But the people here were terrified. Their faces were pale with fear as I parked my truck and went to the local sheriff's office. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Hartman, greeted me with a grim nod. "Grayson, I presume," he said, extending a hand. I shook it firmly. "That's right, I hear you've got a vampire problem." Hartman sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You could say that. People have been disappearing and we've found bodies drained of blood. The last sighting was near the old mansion on the edge of town. No one goes there anymore, it's said to be cursed." "Cursed or not, that's where I'll start," I replied. "I'll need you and your men to stay out of sight. Vampires are dangerous, and I don't need any civilians getting in the way." Hartman nodded. "Understood, just be careful, Grayson. This thing is unlike anything we've ever seen." I gave him a reassuring smile. "I've dealt with worse." As I left the sheriff's office, night had entirely fallen, and the town was dark. The old mansion loomed at the edge of town, a hulking silhouette against the night sky. It was the perfect lair for a vampire lord. I approached the mansion cautiously, my senses on high alert. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the shadows seemed to shift and move independently. Pushing open the heavy wooden doors, I stepped inside. The interior of the mansion was as dark and foreboding as the outside. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and dust covered every surface. I moved quietly through the rooms, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from deeper within the mansion. I followed the sound, my hand hovering over my pistol. The tapping grew louder as I approached a large, ornate door at the end of a hallway. Pushing the door open, I found myself in a grand dining hall. A tall, pale figure stood by a large window at the far end of the room, his back to me. His long, slender fingers drummed against the glass, making a tapping sound. "Welcome, Jackson Grayson," the figure said, his voice smooth and cold. "I've been expecting you." I raised my pistol, aiming it at the vampire's back. "Turn around slowly." The vampire turned, a predatory smile on his lips. He was impeccably dressed, his dark hair slicked back and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "I am Lord Alaric," he said, inclining his head slightly, "and this is my domain." "Not for long," I replied, my finger tightening on the trigger. "You've been causing quite a stir, Alaric. It ends tonight." Alaric chuckled, a low, sinister sound. "Do you really think you can stop me, Hunter? I've been alive for centuries. I've faced countless foes, and yet here I stand." "We'll see about that," I growled, firing a shot at his chest. Alaric moved with inhuman speed, the bullet passing harmlessly through the space where he had been standing. He reappeared behind me, his breath cold on my neck. "You'll have to do better than that," he whispered, his voice like ice. I spun around, swinging my fist and connecting with his jaw. Alaric staggered back, a look of surprise on his face. I followed up with a stake, aiming for his heart, but he caught my wrist, his grip like iron. "You're strong," he admitted, his eyes narrowing, "but strength alone won't save you." He sent me flying across the room with a powerful shove, crashing into a table. Pain shot through my body, but I forced myself to stand, grabbing a vial of holy water from my belt. "Catch," I said, tossing the vial at him. Alaric hissed as the holy water splashed across his skin, burning him. He recoiled, his eyes flashing with rage. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, lunging at me with bared fangs. I dodged his attack, rolling to the side and coming up with another stake. This time, I aimed for his heart with all my strength. The stake found its mark, plunging into his chest. Alaric let out a blood-curdling scream, his body convulsing as the stake drove deeper. He staggered back, clutching at the stake, his eyes wide with shock. "This isn't over," he gasped, his voice weak. I watched as he collapsed to the floor, his body twitching. But I knew better than to assume he was dead. Vampires were notoriously resilient, and a vampire lord even more so. Approaching cautiously, I pulled out a silver dagger, the blade etched with runes. Kneeling beside Alaric, I drove the dagger into his heart, twisting it to ensure the job was done. Alaric's body shuddered, his eyes rolling back as the light faded from them. His body began to disintegrate, turning to ash before my eyes. I stood watching as the last remnants of the vampire lord crumbled to dust. Breathing a sigh of relief, I turned and left the mansion, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Another monster was defeated, and another town was saved. But I knew there would always be more challenges ahead. As I drove back to town, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had faced incredible odds and emerged victorious, but I knew there were still many more challenges ahead. Back at the sheriff's office, Hartman greeted me with a look of disbelief. Did you get him?" I nodded, exhaustion washing over me. "Alaric is no more. Your town is safe." Hartman clapped me on the shoulder, a grateful smile on his face. "Thank you, Grayson. We owe you our lives." "Just doing my job," I replied with a tired smile. "Stay vigilant, Sheriff. There are always more monsters out there." As I drove back to my town, the sun rising higher in the sky, I couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. There would always be monsters to hunt, and always darkness to fight, but I was ready for whatever came next, because that's what a Grayson does, and I was proud to be one. Days passed and life returned to its usual rhythm. The hunts continued, each one a reminder of the darkness lurking in the world. But I faced each challenge with determination, knowing that I was making a difference. One evening as I sat on my porch, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lydia. "Mr. Grayson, we have uncovered a new threat. A coven of witches has been sighted in the nearby forest. Their leader is attempting to summon a powerful demon. We need your help." With a sigh, I got to my feet, already reaching for my gear. The hunt never truly ended, and there was always another monster to face. As I drove towards the forest, the sun setting behind me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was what I lived for, what I was born to do, because I was Jackson Grayson, the best monster hunter this side of the Rockies, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. The forest loomed ahead, its dark canopy casting long shadows over the winding road. I could feel the weight of the task ahead as I drove deeper into the trees. My mind focused on the threat I was about to face. Witches were cunning and dangerous, and a coven led by a powerful witch attempting to summon a demon was a recipe for disaster. When I arrived at the edge of the forest, Lydia was waiting for me, her expression grave. "Grayson, thank you for coming. The situation is dire. The coven has already begun the summoning ritual. We don't have much time." I nodded, grabbing my gear from the back of the truck. "Where are they?" "Follow me," Lydia said, turning and leading the way into the dense forest. "They're deep within the woods, near an old abandoned village. We've managed to disrupt their preparations, but they are resilient and resourceful." As we made our way through the forest, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to twist and shift around us. Lydia moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the trees for any signs of danger. I could sense the tension in the air, the anticipation of a coming battle. We reached the outskirts of the abandoned village, the dilapidated buildings casting eerie shadows in the moonlight. Lydia pointed to a clearing in the center of the village, where a circle of stones had been arranged in a ritualistic pattern. "There," she whispered. "That's where they're performing the ritual." I nodded, checking my gear one last time. "What's the plan?" "We need to disrupt the ritual and defeat the witches before they can complete the summoning," Lydia explained. "I'll focus on breaking their magical defenses. You take out the witches." "Got it," I said, my grip tightening on my rifle. "Let's go." We moved silently through the village, keeping to the shadows. As we approached the clearing, I could see the witches gathered around a large, ancient-looking stone altar. Their leader, a tall woman with long, flowing hair and piercing eyes, stood at the center, chanting in an ancient language. Lydia and I took our positions at the edge of the clearing, waiting for the right moment to strike. The witches were deeply engrossed in their ritual, their attention focused on the dark energy swirling around them. "Now," Lydia whispered, raising her hands and beginning to chant. I moved quickly, stepping into the clearing and firing a shot at the nearest witch. The bullet struck her in the chest and she crumpled to the ground with a cry of pain. The other witches reacted immediately, their chants turning to shouts of anger as they turned to face me. Lydia's chant grew louder, and I could see the magical barrier around the clearing begin to waver. The witches hurled spells at me, bolts of energy crackling through the air. I dodged and fired, taking out another witch before she could cast her spell. The leader of the Coven turned her gaze on me, her eyes burning with fury. "You dare to interfere with our ritual?" she hissed, her voice echoing with dark power. "You will pay for this." I raised my rifle, aiming at her heart. "Not today, lady." She raised her hands, dark energy swirling around her. Before I could fire, a bolt of black lightning shot from her fingertips, striking me in the chest and sending me flying backwards. Pain surged through my body as I hit the ground, my vision blurring. "Grayson!" Lydia shouted, her voice filled with concern. I struggled to my feet, my body aching from the impact. The leader of the Coven approached, her eyes glowing with malevolent light. "You are no match for me, Hunter. Your time is up." I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stand. "We'll see about that." I pulled a silver dagger from my belt, the blade etched with runes. With a shout, I lunged at the witch, driving the dagger into her side. She screamed in pain, dark energy crackling around the wound. Lydia's chant reached a crescendo, and the magical barrier around the clearing shattered. The remaining witches cried out in fear as their leader fell to the ground, the dark energy dissipating around her. "No!" she screamed, her voice filled with desperation. "You cannot stop us." I pulled the dagger from her side, blood dripping from the blade. "It's over." With a final agonized cry, the leader of the Coven collapsed, her body disintegrating into ash. The remaining witches, their power broken, fled into the forest, their cries echoing through the trees. Lydia approached me, her eyes filled with relief. "You did it, Grayson. The ritual has stopped." I nodded, exhaustion washing over me. "We did it, thanks for the backup." She smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you. Your bravery and skill are unmatched." As we made our way back through the forest, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Another threat had been neutralized, another dark force defeated, but I knew there would always be more challenges ahead. Back at the edge of the forest, Lydia turned to me, her expression serious. "Grayson, the world is growing darker. More threats are emerging, and we need hunters like you to help keep the balance." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I'll be ready. Whatever comes next, I'll be there." She smiled, a look of determination in her eyes. "Good, because we need you now more than ever." As I drove back to town, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. There would always be monsters to hunt, always darkness to fight, but I was ready for whatever came next, because that's what a Grayson does, and I was proud to be one.